So hello, we're finally meeting in person, sort of. I have talked with Julia and Lee on the phone a number of times. We've had lots of emails, but this is our first somewhat face-to-face. So I'm Paula. And where am I? Is this the camera I should be looking at? I don't know where I should be looking. This is our trio from Ames High School. On violin, we have Mengza Lee. On cello, we have Ariana Williams Suarez. And on piano, we have Stephen Tian. And they've been rehearsing and getting some coachings in advance of this. And then after this they will have a chance to play this trio at the high school at the final concert, which is this coming Thursday. So we're really looking forward to that. They do not have an official name. I have jokingly called them the Three Musketeers, but that's not probably we'd put in print. So I'll just leave it to them. Well, if you'd like to, speak to them at any point, just let us know when you would like them to start playing, and you can introduce yourselves. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lee. I'm the pianist of the trio, and I'm really excited to hear all of you. And it's also exciting because this Opus 11 trio is not a trio that we play together, which I think makes it better for a masterclass because we're coming to it with fresh ears and excited to hear your ideas for it. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves briefly before we start?
Oh, sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Bridget. I'm the violinist. Really looking forward to this. I'm so glad that we could find the time to to make it happen. Yeah, I'm very excited to hear this trio in particular. As Lee said, it's not something that's in our repertoire, so it feels like a real treat.
Yeah, wonderful to meet you all. I'm Julia, the cellist. I've played this trio with clarinet, and I may have played this movement with violin as well, but I don't know it so well with violin, so excited to hear it in this form. And just for anyone listening, I believe we'll be hearing the second movement, the Adagio from Beethoven's Opus 11.
Yeah, exactly. So if we could all mute, and whenever you guys are ready, you can unmute and have a listen. Thanks.
Awesome. So nice to hear you all. Well prepared.
Bravo. Yeah.
Thanks. So before we get started, I'm just curious from your end, how long have you been working on this and what do you find challenging about it? What do you like about it? And maybe, yeah, let's start with that.
How long has it been?
Speak now.
I think it's been
April.
4 weeks.
Not too long. Well, as far as we're getting together for the first time was sometime in April.
I think mid-April.
Great. Awesome. Fantastic. And what do you find challenging about this particular movement?
We find the tempo to be challenging, setting that and keeping it. That's definitely been a struggle.
Maybe just blending the tone.
And note
Speak loud.
and blending note lengths together to get similar note lengths.
And sorry, what was the last thing?
They said keeping note lengths together.
Yes, yes. Wonderful.
I guess they're cut off from that sort of thing.
Yeah, great. I think we can address several of these things. I was thinking when you were starting, it's sort of an interesting tempo marking, this Adagio, right? Because it's in 3. It's obviously the slow movement, but it feels almost as if it could be a waltz, but it's a little bit too slow for that. Or maybe it's some sort of nostalgic dance. And I was just wondering, I guess, do you guys think very much about the meter? So for instance, have you talked about how you feel 1 versus 3 in a bar of 3? Or how might you explain that to me?
So we've been subdividing a lot for certain sections.
Yeah.
In the beginning, we talked about feeling it in 1. How about you?
In piano, we kind of talked about going from beat 3 to beat 1, especially in the first line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And I think that every part can help with this. So both the cello line and the piano line, for instance, right? So if I'm thinking from the cello, this first note, getting to that E flat is actually somewhat of a relief, right? Because that B flat is the dominant, and suddenly we have the tonic. Yeah, so and you can sort of release there and help your pianist Stephen be able to have a little bit more momentum with those 8th notes, and vice versa. Stephen, of course, you can help just give a little bit more motion with the downbeats, right? And then the 3rd beats, and then it can also be a relaxation, and then looking for something new, right? Maybe what might be helpful, and Lee, maybe you can help out with this, is can we just hear the piano part first? And Stephen, as you play the part, can you think about how you might help propel the motion of like 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, and 1, and always 3 going to 1, but 1 having a little momentum from the beginning?
Okay.
That's really gorgeous. And you know what I loved about that in particular is I felt that your 8th notes, none of them were the same. All of them were like slightly moving forward or holding back a little bit. So maybe can you try the first 4 measures again, one more time? And Ariana, can you take those 8th notes from Stephen and also feel that momentum and where he's holding back and the colors of the different downbeats?
Are we together, playing together, both of us?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
don't know about you, but I felt like that structure held together much better this time. Just one thing, Ariana, when you're thinking about these quarter notes, and then maybe we can move on to the next passage. I would just think a little bit more about the ends of each note. Sometimes I feel that the ends will die just a little bit too quickly. So, for instance, with the third measure, if you're trying to ask a question, just hold on to it slightly longer, and it just gets across a little bit more expression, I think. So really listening to the last third of the note in particular and shaping that.
I think, Julie, that's all super great, and I totally agree. It sounded so much better on the second time, so it was great to just hear you guys play it again. And I just wanted to add a little bit to what Julia was saying, because I noticed when she was demonstrating, right, Julia, you made such a big difference between the first and second downbeats, right, which of course have a different harmony, the third and fourth downbeats. And just to point that out, because that's something that will continue to apply through the movement. I don't know if you've talked about it, but I think it can be helpful not just to think in one, but to think in groups of bars, so odd and even bars of a phrase, kind of which ones you want to emphasize, and that can help get you out of the, sometimes there can be this feeling of like, almost like you're entrapped by the rhythm because it's so similar from bar to bar, but that can really help you be inventive. And Stephen, just to point out, also technically, I noticed when you were playing with Ariana, it was completely different. And you were playing very sensitively, and it was really beautiful. And you actually stayed a little bit more in the keys with your right hand, so it was a little bit less vertical than when you played it on your own. And so I think as you continue, that's another thing just to think about technically that can help. I can just demonstrate a little bit, but instead of thinking so much that you have to produce every note, that was kind of what you did the first time, but going for something a little bit more of a flow. And you can even think that each of your four downbeats, maybe you put it in a little different corner of the room. So if you're thinking about your choreography, right, maybe you start very centered on that E flat, and then the F is over here, the B flat, you reach down for it, and then back to center. So just thinking about how you use your body, because I think if you don't visualize a line or map it out for yourself, then sometimes it just gets in the habit of doing the same thing every bar, and then of course that makes less variety. So I'm just pointing out those things because they were so much better when you played them together, and then I think you can just keep thinking about them as we keep going.
Yeah, maybe we can go on to the violin statement. One thing I was thinking about, it was really beautiful. I was thinking a little bit about, what it means to play this piece in this particular edition of it. So for violin and cello, with piano, and rather than piano, clarinet, cello, it's a very different dynamic. Obviously because we have two string instruments, and so I know that we talk about this a bit amongst ourselves, but one of the lovely things about piano trio playing for us is that there is at once that sense of like real difference between each of the three instruments, but then there's also these commonalities between different pairs of instruments, for example. And one of the obvious ones is you have two string instruments here, and so I wanted to ask you, Mangza, can you describe to me how do you think of your part in relation to Ariana's first statement?
I think I try to make a similar shape and use similar articulation.
Uh-huh. And do you think of there being difference?
I'm not sure. A little bit, maybe.
hmm There's this really beautiful marking that Beethoven puts in for both the violin and the cello, con espressione, with expression. And it's really eloquent in one sense that he should write that in at the beginning of those beautiful melodies, but it's also it's very vague in a sense, isn't it? It really leaves it up to the player to decide, well, what is the expression that I'm trying to play for the listener? What am I trying to communicate? So I think that it can be really helpful to kind of be clear about that for yourselves, but also with each other. And I'm wondering, one thing that can help you just even looking at the score is if, Julia and Lee have just talked with Ariana and Stephen about how their parts relate. And, Stephen is playing these eighths pretty constantly for Ariana's melody. But what is going on, when the violin takes the melody? It's a very different dynamic, isn't it? Can you just talk to me a little bit about that?
I know that she's playing and kind of maybe leading me into some of the da da da.
Yeah, like the whole texture of it is a lot fuller, right? Because Ariana takes over these eighths from Stephen, and then Stephen has this dialogue going on with you, right? So I feel like maybe that can help change the expression. If the cello is also with expression at the very beginning, maybe it's a kind of, I'm just thinking aloud out here, and it can be anything you guys want it to be. But if we think of it as more of a simple, a kind of innocent first statement of this melody that we're going to hear quite a lot through this movement, then suddenly it's something else when it goes into the violin. Not only is it an octave higher, so that has a different kind of feeling to it. It's a different instrument, but also you have these beautiful exchanges of this thematic material with the piano. Maybe we can just play for a start with violin and piano together, just to hear that exchange. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Sorry to stop you, Stephen.
You're good.
That's really beautiful. So part of what's going on there is that the piano is echoing these little fragments of the violin melody, right? And Lee, maybe you can chip in here a little bit too, but I feel like that's a really beautiful and kind of a tender relationship between the two instruments. It's like the piano is listening so hard and it's loving so much what the violin is saying, that it's sort of saying, oh, isn't like, yes, and like, isn't that beautiful? Like, yes, I agree. I love this, or whatever you want to think of it as. But maybe you could have a little bit more of that. Lee, maybe you can help Stephen out, like how to get that beauty of sound. Yes.
No, I totally agree. I love what you're doing with this passage because I had the same thought.
Mm.
And I would just say actually maybe I can just add to the musical idea really quickly. For me, whatever you're thinking of as the character of the cello versus the character of the violin, and I think it could go either way actually. Like the cello could be more simple and the violin could open up, or the cello could be this, very intense solo statement at the beginning, and then the violin could be lighter.
For
But
sure.
either
Yeah.
way, I think that there's actually something more playful about what happens in six that I think all of you could experience more. So I think Mengzi, when you're, or not in six, sorry, in nine, when the violin comes in. So Mengzi, I think as you're playing that, maybe think not just about doing something similar to what Ariana did and playing a beautiful melody, but think of really passing to Stephen. I know it doesn't exactly pass, but I would think of it more as a dialogue or than as an echo, and I would actually feel freer. I think there could be more motion in it. So almost if you could try it again and almost kind of make up the rhythm. And the only thing I would say Stephen, to you is just keeping in mind that, you know, your lower register is the same register as the violin of your octave. So I would really try to get a kind of almost more like bell-like sound to that top octave, and voice even a little bit more to that. It could just be on Zoom, but I don't quite hear the top as well. And then that way it's really in a different register from the violin, which has been in a different register from the cello. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Maybe,
that's a lot, but I'd love to try it again with that in mind, and maybe Bridge, you can add anything that
yeah, let's try it again.
should we add Ariana actually, because I feel like the
Yeah.
moving eighth notes would help with that sense of motion and play.
Yes. Yeah.
I really heard the play going on and the motion. I mean, that was so beautiful.
That was really beautiful.
Just one thing to add. I just wanted to jump in really quickly. Because one general comment for the whole movement that I was thinking about was the dynamics and the interpretation of the hairpins, the crescendi, the sforzandi, right? And it's actually quite a lot of the movement is quite stable or placid even, right? And so I think you can make the most of these hairpins and crescendi when they come up. Often it's just a bar, and I think you could heighten the drama of that sometimes by even having more of a tender feeling at the beginning of the hairpins, withholding a little bit so that you can really release right into wherever you're going. And I would really think of these sforzandi. Sometimes they happen on the downbeat, sometimes they're syncopated, but really exhale like ti and with that kind of release, because I think sometimes you're putting in a lot of effort or energy to produce the sforzando and to make sure it happens on that eighth note, but it can actually get you through the whole bar. It can be the whole gesture of the bar, can be the sforzando, whether it's the downbeat or the sforzando right after it, even wherever it falls, it's more of a release. I don't know if you guys want to add anything.
Yeah, just some little points to add to that. That's really nice. So for those crescendo bars, for instance, for the strings, I was just noticing with the vibrato that to really make that crescendo, you can almost not even vibrate in the beginning of the bar. Like just vibrate, 5%, something like and then really like expand and accelerate the vibrato for that last, G before you get to the C. And then for if you can do it's almost like a cry or something, or just some little ecstatic thing that happens inside. And so, again, technically with the vibrato, it's something like it's like a quick, it's a quick and fast thing that happens and sort of subsides again, right? It's something, I think it's quite difficult to do well, especially in the cello at that register, but that's sort of the idea behind it. And then one other thing for Ariana, in those eighth notes, remember how when Stephen was playing it in the piano, like none of the eighth notes were the same length. They all sort of had their own feelings to them, depending on where they were in the meter, etc. And so again, you can do that and not feel trapped by the meter. That's sometimes one of the most trapping things, I think. So this just like bringing out which notes you think are most beautiful and not feeling like they have to be all the same, right? So I think that also will add to the feeling of the solo voices when they're
And just one more comment about like something to think about in terms of how this theme, this whole melody is structured. At the beginning you have these like little fragments that are always on the 3 and 1, 3 and 1, and then you have this amazing elongation, right, where the line is just starting on these 3 upbeats that you have in measure 9, 10, 11, 12, going into 13. The and then it's a really long line right to the end of the whole phrase, right? And I feel like, especially in this violin statement, that moment of those 3 upbeats there is amazing, because the cello and the violin are in rhythmic unison. And I feel like it could be this absolutely tender moment that we've had these 2 different statements, these 2 different ideas of what this melody is and what it can sound like, and the personalities of the instruments come through, and then suddenly you sing together. And I think, technically speaking, it goes in along with what Julia's saying about this sforzando. We need to think in Beethoven about, there's a lot of articulation, right? And we can get really hung up on, oh, there's a dot and there's a slur, and we need to interpret it in this very particular way. But I think we always need to be keeping in mind, well, what's the context? What's the character of the movement? What's the dynamic context? And all of that impacts how we're interpreting the dynamics, within certain parameters. So right there, my reaction to how you guys played it was a bit too rigid. It was suddenly a bit out of the emotional context that you'd already set up. It was so beautiful, and then suddenly it felt a little bit like, and it didn't kind of fit within this tender atmosphere that you'd set up. So I think you can just soften it a little bit, like, just to have the hint of the staccato there. But always keeping in mind, it's like this line is just hoping against hope, and it's suddenly looking at a horizon. Always trying to keep the kind of emotional character with you. Maybe we can just try once more with all of these ideas. Sorry, it's a lot to ask you to do in one go.
Also, should I start from one icon?
Really beautiful.
I'm wondering, can we try something a little different? Do you guys mind if I take over for a second? Because we can talk till the cows come home about every little phrase, but have you guys talked about the structure of this movement at all?
Not really.
A bit. Not much.
Sorry, I can't tell if there are nonverbal responses. I can't tell with the masks.
Oh yeah, not much.
Not
A
much.
bit, not much.
A bit. Okay. Have you gone through and analyzed the harmony at all?
No.
Not specifically.
Okay, that's totally fine. Do you? This is just gathering information. Do you know what the form of the movement is? I'm just sharing this not to grill you, but because I didn't know what the form of the movement was either, and then I was just looking through it just now, and it's so interesting because it's a sonata form, which is crazy because it's such a short movement, and this whole sonata form happens. And so I was thinking about it because I was just thinking about these phrase lengths, and actually in a sonata form, I mean, aside from having different themes, you have your first theme, second theme, development, recapitulation, whatever. We've studied that a little bit maybe, but the important thing about sonata form is also the key areas, right? Because the first theme happens in the home key, and then the whole point of the second theme area is you modulate to the key of the dominant. So you get this kind of like heightened energy, right? And then the development, kind of whatever happens harmonically. And then the recap, you get again home key, and then this time the second material happens in the home key and you stay in the home key, right? That's the basic plan. So it's almost like an ABA. You've got exposition, recap, and then this wildcard development section. And so what's interesting to me about this, right, is we've been talking about the character and how it's such a stable movement, and so you get to the end of that phrase that you just played and you have a cadence again in E flat major, measure 16, right? It feels very stable. And Bridget was just talking about really seeing that phrase through all the way, right? And I think you could keep thinking in that way. So Stephen, as you go on from 16, right, really thinking, no, but I don't want it to end, right? So even though you've cadenced, I think the way you get through those 16th notes, even though it's free, right, is like wanting to continue. And then the piano, this is going to be really quick analysis, sorry, but what I want you to do is actually to try a large section thinking about it this way. So the piano statement at 17, right, is actually a transition. That's important because it's a solo, but it's a transition. So you can think a lot about the moving notes, right, and how those are actually like helping you flow through the section. Then in 22, you actually have your second theme in the key of B flat now, right? And then in 26, you get your final cadence in B flat, and that wraps it up, right? So I think if you think of 17 as transitional, right, really getting through that piano solo, then really enjoy the second theme in 22, really cadence in 26, right? Then 27 is already the development. So you have E flat minor now, right? It's as different as possible. It's as pianissimo as possible. I think you could really bring out that mystery, that dynamic a lot more. That was a gut reaction when I first heard it, but I think now if you think of it as this long suspenseful section, right, and really bringing out the dynamics in that section, using some of those techniques, delaying the crescendi, really only doing the dynamics where he marks and keeping it suppressed when it's lower dynamic, right, and then that goes all the way until 42, which is finally when you get the recap, right, and I think we can kind of bring out a lot more of the suspended weirdness of that whole section while that's going on. So if you guys are open to it and game for it, I would love to hear just that whole section maybe one more time, like thinking about that larger plan, and then we can maybe jump in for some of the details. Does that sound good to everybody?
So from 16?
Yeah, well, I'd love to go maybe even just one more time from 9.
Okay.
And then 9 all the way to 42 kind of again, but thinking about that form and maybe also thinking about just the way that, like, I loved what Julia was saying about the eighth notes in Ariana's part in 9, and I think actually those in general, the moving notes, you could, whoever has them in the, so-called accompaniment could be using them in all of these sections when you want to have a transitional section versus when you want something stable to kind of show that as well. Yeah, that was perfect. I just wanted to say, um, what was actually what worked so great for me was some of those crescendos and sforzandos, and I really thought the atmosphere from 31 was actually excellent. And I know Ariana, like you, um, you thought you were stopping and everything, but I really thought that the character of the pianissimo was so much better suspended in that middle section. So
Great. Yeah, let's just work on the development a little bit. Awesome. Really nice to hear you all play it through one more time. So you guys were talking about how it's sometimes tough to find the motion, right, in this piece. So looking at measure 27, Beethoven changes the texture, right? He changes what the basic sort of motor is. So what's going on? What's going on? What are the smallest notes that are driving the rhythm starting in this development section?
My 16th note triplet to my left hand.
Yeah, right, your sextuplet triplets. And so I think, I mean, we often talk about in our trio about this idea of, we have a lot of different concepts that we like to use for various passages. And for something like this, we would probably use this idea of like transportation. So you can pick whatever mode of transportation you like to use. So let's say I'm actually in Florida right now, so we've been looking at different boats and just been on the water. So in this one, maybe there's these roiling sort of sextuplets in E flat minor, and so it's maybe like maybe it's some sort of sailboat that's having a tough time on the water, right? So if in this sort of metaphor, just bear with me, the left hand of the piano would be the waves, right? And then Ariana, what would you be?
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay. Well, in this particular metaphor, I would imagine my part as the cello part to be sort of this boat trying to ride on these waves, right? So it's very much connected, and it's always riding on top of the waves. And if at any point you're not riding on the waves, you're basically going to fall over into the water. So you really have to be connected all the time to the left hand of the piano. Okay. So in that case, like I could play it two different ways. So this first way would be not really thinking about the piano, and I would just think about a crescendo. And it can be maybe somewhat convincing just doing that. But if you're actually thinking about the sextuplets underneath, I would think more like. There's just a little bit more turbulence, right? And it's not exactly in proportional crescendo necessarily. You could think of it more like waves or whatever type of transportation where there's going to be a little bit of an acceleration and then maybe explosion or whatever is happening on this sforzando. Can you guys try it together? Even just the left hand, Stephen, your left hand, and Ariana, your part?
I'll do the pickups.
Sorry. Okay.
Great. So I could feel, Ariana, that you were trying to sort of bring Stephen's sextuplets with you, but you were sort of beating him in the downbeats, right? So you have to listen really carefully and try to guide the sextuplets with your sound. And Stephen, can you go along with how you feel Ariana's sound is guiding your sextuplets? So they don't have to be really even either.
I totally agree. My intuition, and again, it's difficult over Zoom, but I think that Stephen, you could feel a lot more inner agitation in your rhythm and also lead a lot more with the rhythm. I think in general, all of the moving parts can lead a lot more. And all of what Julia is saying, which is so, I mean, it's like the essence of chamber music, right? Like what it's about is really the ability to play freely together. And I think you all have that ability because you know these parts so well. So make sure that it's always leading together. Do you want to try one more time?
great. Okay, so Mangsa, let's go with this metaphor of Julia's. If Ariana is the boat, Stephen is the waves, who are you?
Maybe the storm. I don't know.
Sure, actually, that's a great one. I was going to go for the person who's really terrified by what's happening. Is like, oh God, that sort of expression. But hey, maybe you could be the thunder or like the lightning bolt or something. I don't know. But do you want to try now entering into this dynamic that Stephen and Ariana have set up? So you need to be really dramatic. And what I thought when you played it through before, it's tricky, isn't it, for you, because they've set up this pianissimo crescendo dynamic. So for a start, collectively, the three of you need to be clear about, well, what is that dynamic that we're reaching at the top of that very short crescendo that we're going to reach in measure 26, 27, 28, on the sforzando. Do you guys have an idea of what sort of dynamic level are you understanding that sforzando operating in?
Forte?
Sorry?
Sorry, maybe forte?
Okay.
Or what?
I mean, it's open to interpretation, right? I would probably say maybe something a little less if we're going to go with Lee's idea that this is just a really weird section for the whole development, really, and it's operating within these kind of mysterious dynamic levels. But it could also be that it could be really dramatic. And let's go with your idea for this. And in this, so if we're going to go from a pianissimo upbeat from Stephen to a forte in one measure, it's got to be really dramatic, that first bar. So this is on Ariana and Stephen to try and create this drama. And then, Mangze, you're going to be really dramatic. And so the sforzando needs to happen, but then you still need to retain something so we can do this decrescendo properly. So it's important that the sound doesn't die too quickly, like... You got to like retain something in the vibrato, in the dynamic level. And then once you get to the bottom, it's a little bit like we were talking about before. Let's think about this articulation that can be a bit confusing sometimes, but this articulation that Beethoven does a lot of the two dotted eighth notes with the slur over the top. So it's not something that's too staccato and too out of this emotional context. It's very dramatic, right? Like, think of them as maybe something that's pleading at the end of this wail that you're about to give. Do you want to try this idea? So, Stephen, why don't we start from your upbeat, and you and Ariana are going to try and be as dramatic as possible getting to this moment. Yeah.
That was great. I just have one thing to add, and then I'd love to hear you try one more time. I feel like you're all playing so passionately, but you're not quite meeting each other. So, I was so struck by Mung's sound when he came in the first time. I mean, I thought that was a great lightning or thunder or whatever, right? So maybe for Stephen and Ariana, like imagine his sound in your ears as you lead up to it. Almost imagine it coming in so that you're leading to that. And Mungza, make sure that you're taking it from them also so that it's not its own separate thing. And maybe Julia, you can help with this too, but I was thinking when it goes back to just piano and cello texture at 31, what I really wanted to hear Stephen, you did this the last time on the playthrough. I think you could withhold on the piano again, right? Because it's such an unexpected harmony. So maybe if both of you are feeling that harmony, it's like, why does he write the crescendo at the end of the bar? I think it's because we have this moment of wonder where we're just sitting with that harmony, and then we go on, right? And then the same thing, he doesn't write the decrescendo until the end of 32. Because then the piano gets up to this beautiful E and it just wants to sing, right? It wants to hang on to that as long as possible. And so maybe there's something also in the cello that can help that. I don't know what Julie, you can advise.
Yeah, absolutely. So, right, in the beginning it's E flat minor, right? And then what is it? C flat minor? And then it has a very unexpected F sharp. And so maybe with the sound, you don't even have to vibrate in the beginning of that note, right? Just signal that something's different, right? And that note, as Lee was saying, really goes for longer, right? The other ones have an immediate, like, hairpin downwards, right? But this one really has that decrescendo for another measure and a half, and you really have to help Stephen make a 4-bar line, basically, all from 31 to 34. Does that make sense? Yeah, so you in particular, the cello actually has a lot of power with only like 5 notes or 6 notes to really sustain the line and shape that. So you guys want to try one more time? Yeah, that's better. I think it's something to keep working on. Just this tool of vibrato and how much color and character that you can get from it, whether you're always vibrating or really suddenly not vibrating, and that causes something of a shock. So, yeah, I think 31 might be a good opportunity to use that.
Magda, just a tiny little detail. For these sforzandos, I think that if you can start with your bow on the string and still make that dramatic effect, so that it's not always a drop, because I think that can make it a little difficult to kind of meet your colleagues and be really kind of integrated into the texture, because it's a little bit unpredictable if we drop our bows a lot. So I'm starting with my bow right on the string. I'm not doing, because I have less control basically once I do that. So can you just try that for a second? Just try making that sforzando with the bow on the string. Yeah, try again. Yeah. Really nice. Yeah. I think that that'll just help you kind of sort of fit within that texture that they've set up a little bit more and still have the drama that you want.
Bridget, did you want to hear that one more time, or should we maybe look at the and there's some different stuff in the recap.
Let's go on just so we cover as much as possible.
Maybe we could start from, do you want to just play a little bit more from 42 from the recap? Is that okay with everybody?
I do like my pickup into the next.
What?
I'll do my pickup into the 42.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful. Maybe I'll just make some general comments, honestly, just hearing it again, and also because you guys are quick. I know you can really take all of this in. So, just from where we played, right? Beautiful recap. The things that stand out to me, right, are measure 50, because Beethoven bothers to repeat those three bars, right? And it's rinforzando, and now the strings are playing in unison, right? Really helping the piano along. And so I think, all of the texture is so amazing in this, but really maybe think about the difference in texture right at the recap, right? It's fuller. Stephen, I think in your part, you could actually support a lot more from the bass and kind of be as light as possible in the right hand. I know you already are, but just actually think about what a big role that bass plays for how few notes there are in the overall texture. And then in 50, I think that fills out with everybody, right? It's like you're singing this again from the bottom of your hearts. And then 53, right? It's interesting, it's beautiful what he's doing with these solo bars, but harmonically really nothing is happening, right? He's just ending it again and again, and then nothing happens until 57, which is the drama when it goes to C minor, right? So I think just as an overall plan you could feel it a bit more, just that, again, thinking of these odd and even bars, right? In 53 and 54, those two bars work together. 55 and 56 work together, and then you stretch the end of 56 as you're already doing, but you could feel it even more. And then from 57 you have this long extension in minor. So that's just kind of just laying out the architecture in general.
Great. Yeah, let's work on just a couple details in the recap, and then we probably need to finish up, I think. So right at 42, I just want to go back quickly to this idea of transportation. So what's going on in the piano in this recap? How is it different from the beginning?
I have a bunch of 30-second notes, and they're
30
going up.
30-second notes that are going up, right? So this is sort of the fastest accompaniment sort of figure that you've had so far, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because it's also marked piano, even though all three voices are happening here, right? So is everybody marked piano? Right, and in the beginning, actually, there isn't a piano in the cello line. That could be interpreted sort of any way you want. But to me, when I see these markings, it's piano, there's the three voices, and there's these 30-second notes. There's sort of like this ecstatic quality to what's going on, and you're sort of brimming over with this maybe joy of returning to this theme. Like you can't fully like express it, at least in these first 8 bars or so, and then he repeats it with this rinforzando, which is just incredible. Like you have to do it again with the piano doing it, and you guys doing the unison. So okay, so sorry, that's a lot. But maybe Ariana, again, when you're feeling this melody, there's something so uplifted about it, right? And so I think maybe in the type of sound, you could think about taking along those 30-second notes again. So I'd like to hear just you with Stephen, but think about perhaps instead of having a concentrated sound, like maybe you might in the beginning, have this sort of sound that has this sort of like joy in it, this sort of ecstasy. So maybe a little bit more bow speed, just a little more flutter to it. That mirrors what's happening in the piano.
Which means that, Stephen, you'll need to be even lighter in the right hand too.
Mm-hmm. So maybe just the violin and cello for a few bars.
Violin and cello?
Oh, sorry, piano and cello. Piano and cello. Great. Wonderful. Okay, I already hear the difference in the sound, which is really, really wonderful. And again, I just want to hear the ends of the notes also still sort of flying or sailing, right? So, right, they're still sort of flying on top of the water if we're still maintaining this metaphor. They don't really, sorry, you don't sound like that, but they don't stop, right? It's not like that, but there's a rest, but if you're still imagining that sailboat, it's like really flying in the wind right now, right? So can we try just that one more time and really think about the ends of the notes? And Stephen, if you can think about really bringing along the line with your 30-second notes.
Sorry.
Yeah, beautiful. And each end of the note can be different depending what you're trying to express with it, right?
Yeah. And then I think, Mangza, again, it's a question of how do you fit into this beautiful partnership that the piano and the cello have going on here. And, you know, these hairpins that Beethoven writes, it's a bit like all of the other articulation that we've been discussing. For me, it's always very context specific. There's never just one way to interpret a hairpin like that. And so for here, you know, just listening to you, I think that you can help Stephen create this amazing likeness. It's like Julia talked about this ecstatic quality, and I feel like you're almost like a heart flutter or a tiny heart palpitation. Like you can't believe how beautiful this scene that you've just entered into is. You can't believe how beautiful this melody that Ariana is playing again is. So it doesn't have to be something big, but again, you can use your vibrato to help and to make a like that sort of overflowing quality, and it doesn't quite ever leave the cup, but it's just there at the surface. I'm really trying to lift. Just something really special that fits in with this beautiful gossamer sound that Stephen has. Do you want to just try piano and violin just to create this thing for Ariana's melody? Sorry to interrupt. Let's just start that again because we weren't quite fitting together.
Maybe don't play that first note. Just come in on the.
Stephen, do you want to try cueing it if it's not too weird? Might actually be better. Maybe that's a weird idea, but.
I think, Mangza, you're just beating Stephen slightly and coming in on the downbeat rather than the second eighth. Great. Yeah. So I think you can play around with that a little bit. It doesn't always have to be, especially if Ariana is going to create some sort of really tender texture or whatever character you decide that this recapitulation is going to have ultimately, whether it's this ecstatic quality or whether it has slightly more sound. You know, you can vary the amount of bow you're using also to reflect how the harmony is changing. So it doesn't always have to be very even. Do you, Lee and Julia, do you want to do another bit before we finish, or shall we play this once more?
I mean, it's all in deference to time and what you guys want to do. I would love to hear just 50 again, just really singing, because I thought.
Sure, let's do that.
but we could. I want to hear the recap all together, of course, because we've been working on it.
Why don't we do from your upbeat Ariana once more into 42 and then keep going?
Okay, so how about let's stop at measure 53.
Great.
You know, all I want to do is just hear you guys play things again because it sounds really beautiful. Um, I mean, the thought that occurred to me, we don't have to do this, but I just wanted all of that section that we worked on, which was so beautiful, to really stay more in that magical character until 46, right? Because in some ways it should be an amplification of that phrasing quality that we talked about at the beginning, right? Where there are these little hairpins in between, but really there's no hairpin until 46 in a larger sense, right? Because then 47 is some dynamic. Maybe it's mezzo forte, maybe it's forte, but it's a lot bigger. And then I think that would also leave you a little bit more room to play a lot at 50. Have that be up.
Cool. And then one more thing, if we're gonna hear one more time, when we get to measure 50, this is. Do you guys sort of agree that this is maybe like the climax of the piece?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
we were sort of talking about in the structure. It's the climax with these unison singing lines and the strings, and Beethoven is basically repeating the highlight of the phrase. In the piano, right? And so I think that can really be reflected in the string parts. Sorry. It's really that sort of sfortunato singing again. It's sort of this joy that like you can't even contain, and you're doing it together, right? So there's nothing about it that's like there's nothing about it that's measured. Really, like this is sort of like the ultimate like place where you have to use some sort of singing vibrato, like da 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 da, right, instead of da 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 da. No, nobody's in a box here. So I wonder if we can try just one more time, and you guys, if the strings can even kind of lead the piano line, I mean, respond to Stephen's line, but really sort of lead him with this sort of unison singing that you're just so excited about. I would love to.
Yeah, that's really great. And actually, just one more thought occurred to me. Sorry, and Stephen, in your part, I think you're bringing out the bass a lot better in 42, but you can do even more at 46, right? And in a way, that's what's helping the crescendo. So you can play this part, and I can't. But maybe you could imagine that, when you're playing at 42. Almost like none of the notes are real except for that, and almost as if everything is like grace notes in between. And then when you get to 46, suddenly you have this right, and then everything above that is still gossamer. Nothing else is real, but that bass line is real. Yeah. Do you guys want to try it one more time? Bridget, do you want to add anything?
The only thing I would say is for the strings, when you finally meet on these last 3/8 of 45 and you play this theme together, I think I think just being aware of any time where the two of you are creating a melody together, it's really important. And that's something about trio playing in general, that we can all be like very independent and independently voiced, but any moments where the composer is really saying, I want two or more instruments to sing something together, that's very meaningful. So I think just really having this feeling of playing with each other, to each other, and taking the melody together. So we do from upbeat to 42 once more.
That was so gorgeous.
Great. Yeah.
Really beautiful singing together, and that the Gossamer 32nd notes were really gorgeous too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we're probably really out of time. Sorry to go so much over, but thank you guys so much. You sound really beautiful, and really good luck with your performance. That's very exciting after this whole last year to think that you have a performance. That's really cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you guys have any questions for us?
Yeah, any questions? Go ahead. Thank you so much. This has been, the culmination of something we've been looking forward to for a year, I guess. And even though we weren't together in one spot, it feels like we were today. And this was really, really wonderful. I'm going to cry. I do this every time. So anyway, thank you so much. I hope I'm looking in the right place now. Before I was looking at the screen because that's what I'm used to doing when I do Zoom on my own laptop. So thank you so much. We hope to be in touch. We'll let you know how the performance goes on Thursday.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you so much for putting this together.
All
Really
right.
good.
Good luck.
We had a number of parents enjoying this here as well as the violin coach who's worked with the students. So it's been a great experience all around. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There we go.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so long.
Bye-bye.